Okay, we're back. Guys, I think this may be Ben's first live. Is this your first live video?
Not in the background.
On the background. So, I know there's nobody on live right now because it's late, so I'm sorry. But I just asked him to share a little bit kind of the husband's perspective and the perspective of someone who's like not a coach. And the lighting's weird, so sorry. If you guys have questions on this, please just drop them below and we'll make sure to come back and answer them for sure if you can't be on this live. But do you want to kind of just share about when I started coaching, like what you kind of thought about? Because I asked him to read everything before I ever pulled the plug on it.
Sure. So when Abby originally was deciding whether or not to do this, she asked me what I thought. And at first I didn't really know anything because I was never really getting all the messages that she was getting and didn't know that much about the program. So
Ben's never on social media ever.
By design. But so I had really a fresh look with no preconceptions about the business opportunity, the business itself of Beachbody as an institution. And so I just started with the nitty-gritty documents, all the fine print that you always want to read but don't. I kind of like that stuff, and Abby doesn't, so I was happy to look at it for her. And I'm not a real risky guy, you may know, and I like to, for business and otherwise, look at a lot of things from an ROI perspective. And what I found pretty quickly is that in terms of a return on investment, there's not a lot of investment at all apart from maybe some time. So the return is quite high in a lot of different avenues. There's financial, and then for what most people end up doing it for in the first place is for working out and being in community with other people trying to get more fit as well. So the return is potentially pretty huge, and I wasn't really seeing anything as far as an investment goes. So for me, when I look at risk being, how much can you lose? What are you putting at stake if this doesn't work out? Well, nothing really. So I said, go for it. Worst that happens is you, get your shakes paid for and get fit. So I think that's as simple as my takeaway was at first.
And the compensation plan, as you've seen the potential in it and stuff.
Yeah, compensation plan is great. It's by design complicated, and they have to do it that way for a number of reasons, and it kind of rewards the diligent and those that pay attention. If business, if income progression, and other job replacement is the goal, you'll definitely be rewarded to pay attention to the nitty-gritty details. But none of from what I could tell, it was all built to fairly remunerate those that are working at adding to the company. And the right leg, left leg, or strong and weak, no matter how you want to call it, it's not there to be weird or gimmicky. It's just to try to pay more to the people who are doing more for the company, and off the basis that everyone involved will be getting benefited from the reasons they're purchasing the product. But as far as the pay is concerned, you'll be benefited from doing well for the company as well.
What about since I've started coaching, what benefits do you feel like you've seen either in our family, professionally, just kind of as a spouse? Because I know sometimes I will talk to so many people who are like, well, my husband's not on board because he thinks I'm going to get in a pyramid scam and be weird on social media, and it's just going to ruin everything for us. So kind of, can you speak to that? Since you're not a big fan of social media, I wasn't on it at all.
I like it now.
Yeah.
I don't have to do anything, and it works great for me.
But yeah, can you kind of share, I guess, some of the benefits, the ways that you've seen it benefit our family, benefit us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's been a progression as well. At first it was, we just really liked the product. It's a great product, and it was a way to pay for the product.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can work out with Sagi every morning for free, you work out with Sagi every morning for free, and it's great. If you can have Shakeology for free, it's great. You can have it for free by having a couple coaches a month or however that shakes out. So honestly, that is a win in itself. And then at first, we were each working numerous jobs, and a lot of them were not all the paying kind. Did a lot of volunteer work and such. And so I think for Abby, being able to do something that is volunteer-ish in the service aspect, but still bringing home some income, was really helpful. And especially when she first started, there was always the dream that she might not have to, we might not have to take the kids to daycare. So I don't want to say the dream that she could come home from work, because she loves to work. She's great at working. It's just a matter of how to craft your life and your work together such that you're not leaving anybody in the dust, and kind of bringing everybody up together. And Beachbody was a great way to make that happen. And it was a progression for sure. And I think Abby always in her income posts, which she hates doing, but they're good. When she does them, if you kind of look back, she used to post like, hey, I paid for my groceries, or I paid for my student loan payment, or some, lower stepping stones. And then once it came to the point where I replaced my full-time income, it's like, well, I think it's time to not have that job anymore.
Do you feel like, aside from the income, there's been like benefits to our family that you've noticed? I think a lot of times people are worried, my spouse is going to jump into this and they'll just be oversharing on social media, or people will judge us for being in some weird thing, or I don't want her. Yeah, like just those types of, like, how has it impacted our family in positives, negatives? Like,
I think most of the impact I already mentioned, just in the we like the product, we like the income, and getting the kids home from daycare was the absolute biggest thing we could have hoped for. So in terms of, are you going to look weird on social media? Well, that's up to you, maybe. But that's why you have a coach who's walked this road before and knows that to give you good advice, and that you don't need to hard sell and pressure. You need to just be you and show your journey, and that will hopefully inspire, but at least encourage some other people to walk the same steps. But I mean, you see some people out there with some pretty goofy social media posts, and they're usually straining a little bit, trying to square peg in a round hole kind of post.
and I'll say, like, I will oftentimes run posts by Ben first. I'm not big on like the bikini pictures and things like that, so I do try to be respectful of like our family, and I'm very conscious about what I'm sharing in terms of like privacy and stuff like that. This is nothing that Ben does, but like I do toggle my privacy settings. I'm aware of who's following me, all of those things. So I'll just throw that out there. In terms of thinking through advice that you would give to a wife, let's say, on helping her husband understand the business and take it seriously and be supportive, what would you say to her? And then what would you say to a spouse of a coach in how they could help, or again, understand, be supportive?
I'll cycle back to the last question for one more point.
Yeah.
And on the being, what if I look weird? So sometimes that's good. Abby listens to all these calls from these successful coaches, and probably, 3 out of 5 times they are just not our brand. And they're successful in what they do, how they do it, because there's a lot of different people out there. And when when somebody is looking for encouragement, if they're looking for somebody to aspire after, it usually starts with a little bit of familiarity and seeing somebody that you can see yourself in. Mm-hmm. And so if you look a little weird on social media, there's probably a lot of people that's what they're looking for.
And I do have to say, like, when we started, Ben would never be in pictures with me ever. Like, never. And now he's doing...
I still try.
He's doing live videos. So it's been a journey for both of us, but I think as I have grown more confident in the business and learned how to communicate that with him, that's helped. I think seeing a return on the investment has helped. I think I've tried from the beginning to treat the business like a business and explain to him, like, why it's important to me, what my personal goals are. You know, if there's a big thing that I'm shooting for that's maybe going to take a little bit of extra time and it requires some childcare arranging or things like that, to try to be on the same page so he understands. But I guess, can you kind of give some advice for both ends of, like, what has helped you understand what I'm doing, and then what things could, like, a wife do that you get it.
Mm-hmm. And that's the same question you asked before.
Yeah.
About
like,
I don't worry about it too much. I know that Abby gets a lot of here's a lot of objections that either coaches or prospective coaches or their spouses might have, and I think that it just, to me, is just generalized concern from not knowing what you're getting into and knowing what's around the corner. I don't really worry about that because there's nobody really telling you what to do. You can craft it your own way. And for us, that's meant, for important things to schedule in, we might just talk through, okay, I'm going to be doing such and such a video at such and such time. You could be home to be with the kids, and great. But the big worries of it'll be too much time, or you'll look weird, or you'll spend too much money, all of those there's really nothing to them from what I can tell. Mm-hmm. It just may be apprehension, or maybe somebody's seen somebody do it poorly, and that can create fear. But look for the people that are doing well and try to follow them instead of trying to not be the ones who do it wrong.
Mm-hmm. In terms of kind of understanding the business structure or things that you think would be helpful for a spouse to be supportive of a coach, like, what would you say? Like, I guess I'll jump in with here a little bit. Like, Ben, for me, does a lot of the back-end finance stuff and, like, business strategy. So I've brought him in so he understands, because he is a finance guy, the business structure. But, like, how could a spouse be supportive to help their coach thrive in the business instead of being a hindrance to them, like, to really help them kind of fly and actually be successful?
Same way you support each other every day. It's really no different. I mean, I guess the only difference is it's a portion of work done at home instead of in a cube somewhere. So it's more visible to your spouse. But just in the same way that if you're both working and you both debrief about your jobs when you get home and support each other in the same things you're walking through that way, the only difference is that happens in maybe the middle of the day and you're walking through things in the moment instead of talking about them afterwards. But it doesn't have to be anything complicated in terms of how to support your spouse or what you're looking for in support. It's if you trust each other, you love each other, and you have each other's backs, then you'll do the right thing. And there's a lot of different personalities out there. We see videos of coaches that like for us, like Abby mentioned, all I really do is help game plan behind the scenes. And for others, those roles are reversed. And so it's up to every coach and every coach's spouse to know how it's going to fit for them, and don't feel the pressure to do things exactly the way that somebody else is just because they're successful. Mm-hmm. We see a lot of successful coaches, and we're not following those footsteps.
When I very first started, like the first 2 weeks, I didn't make any money, and then my first paycheck was $50. and then it was like $100, and there's been ups and downs. So I guess in kind of, and you may have touched on this a little bit already, but kind of understanding the long-term game plan. Because I know a lot of people, it's like, oh, you invested all this money and you're not making anything right away, and you're just in some scam that's going to take all your money and all this stuff. Like, I guess, what would you say to kind of that long-term vision piece, since you understand the business side?
Well, first, don't overlook the short victories, because those are really encouraging too. And I know even in personal finance, if people get too worried about the large mountain they're climbing and they don't appreciate the small victories along the way, it looks a lot more daunting. And so appreciating the product just on a daily basis is really a win. And even if your income is not snowballing from day one, you're still getting fit, you're still encouraging other people. Appreciate those victories along the way. And as far as the long game goes, if you are pursuing replacing an income, supplementing an income, earmarking one part of your budget to be paid for by coaching, then just listen. Everything you need to know is out there. Ask Abby. There's never a shortage of information and advice in a company where every employee is a coach. So you'll never be short on advice, and following that advice is going to keep you on track for doing well in the long run.
One thing that Ben has helped me with too is I will have all these big goals and things like that, and I'd get discouraged if I didn't hit it, or if my paycheck wasn't as big, or it dropped a little bit the week. And then he reminded me, like, Abby, you worked a half hour today. You've worked a total of 3 hours this week, and you still made X amount of dollars. So how much are you earning per hour? And so it's been helpful to have kind of that perspective too, of like, I'm not actually working that many hours compared to what I was doing full time. And so even when I was working full time and building this in these little cracks, I still was doing it in somewhere between 20 minutes and 2 hours a day. And so even when it'd be like, oh, you made $200 this week, well, that's a great return, I think, on your time. And that's one thing that he was been really helpful in kind of helping me back up and get my head out of the sand to kind of see that bigger perspective.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Anything else? Any last thoughts?
No, but you can ask me.
Yeah, I know there is not a ton of you guys able to be on live just because of the time. So if there's other questions that you have for Ben, I mean, we're both totally open books. So feel free just to drop them below, and we are happy to come back and share. I'll make sure that he gets to answer them if they're specific to him. And otherwise, I hope you guys have a great evening. Bye.